Welcome to this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on culture and identity, looking at feminism and culture. Feminism, as a conflict theory, examines the ways in which culture serves the interests of what is perceived to be the dominant group in society, that is, men. Feminists argue that society has a patriarchal culture that places more emphasis on male achievements and male interests, while simultaneously repressing the interests and achievement of females. The extent of this oppression is debated by different branches of feminism, with some, such as liberal feminists, seeing progress towards more equal representations in culture. On the other hand, radical and intersectional feminism see culture as being more oppressive towards women, and in the case of intersectional feminism, women are oppressed to differing degrees based upon their social class, their ethnicity, their sexuality, and other social characteristics. Furthermore, Marxist feminists argue that culture is organised around both capitalism and men, leading to a dual oppression of women's interests. In this video, we're going to look at these different perspectives and how each views culture. Both liberal and neoliberal feminism argue that culture is less unequal than it was in the past, with progress being made in employment, representation in the media, and politics, moving the interests of women more into the spotlight and becoming part of debates around culture. For these groups, arguments often centre on representation of women's achievements in culture and how much say women have in the construction of society's culture. This is largely centred on change through legislation, challenging sexist language and behaviour in the workplace, challenging assumptions presented in the media, and promoting equality and empowerment through the curriculum in education. While their general focus is on inequality between male and female experiences, critics have argued that liberal and neoliberal feminism is more about individualised experiences and focuses more on the experiences of white middle-class women rather than examining a broader range of women's experiences. Marxist feminists argue that capitalism is central to the cultural exploitation that women face in society. Capitalism is a key motivator for inequality. Women are not only oppressed by their class, but also by their gender within contemporary society. One area that Marxist feminists look at is that consumption is targeted at women. For example, beauty industries operate through exploiting women, creating insecurities, and then capitalising upon them by selling them goods. A second example is the cultural expectations of women to perform unpaid labour by looking after children and how this serves the needs of capitalism. Additionally, these expectations free males to pursue their own interests. This can also be seen through emotional labour, with women expected to absorb the psychological load of their family's emotional well-being. Furthermore, many cultures see women's careers as secondary to those of males, which leaves women vulnerable to becoming a reserve army of labour. Women's employment is seen as less valuable to the family than that of males, and this makes them more likely to be in part-time or insecure employment. Marxist feminists argue that this serves the needs of capitalism by being able to offer or withdraw employment as and when the economy requires it, creating a reserve army of labour. Radical feminists view culture as being inherently patriarchal, and that despite changes, this is unlikely to change without radical interventions. Women are underrepresented in most power relationships, and this means that culture will always be organised around males. Whilst they've been criticised for failing to acknowledge movements towards inequality, radical feminists argue that minor adjustments often paper over the cracks. Women's needs and interests are still oppressed or devalued in social institutions such as family, education, and media. While there is more representation of women in institutions such as education and media, the main power relationships within these structures still largely favour men, and women are expected to adopt male characteristics to get ahead within these institutions, thus defining masculinity as the more powerful domain. For example, while there are more women being involved in the presentation of news and sports, the content is still largely centred on the interest of males, with issues impacting on women represented as being a novelty or of lesser importance. A further example of this is healthcare. While there are increasingly more female doctors, there are still massive health inequalities between males and females, and how female health is trivialised in comparison to that of males. Intersectional feminism looks at culture on a more micro level, examining the different experiences of women based upon their social class, their ethnicity, and other social characteristics. They argue that women, and indeed men, are oppressed based upon the different social characteristics they have. For example, middle-class white women will experience oppression in society compared to middle-class white men, but they will face less barriers than a black working-class woman, who will have to contend with barriers that result from their ethnicity, their social class, and their gender. Intersectional feminists look to provide a voice to these women, looking at their experiences of the culture that surrounds them and how they negotiate these on a day-to-day basis. Intersectional feminism has developed from criticisms of second-wave liberal feminism, which centred on the experiences of relatively educated white women in society. And intersectional feminism looks to address those left behind by that movement. In evaluating the different feminist views of culture, it's important to consider the extent to which culture has addressed issues raised by women and celebrated the contribution of women to our culture. While some acknowledge the progress made, others, such as Walby, argue that our culture still largely looks to control women through employment, in the home, in public spaces, and through debates. Furthermore, it can be argued that there is inequality within inequality, and that the wide range of experiences of women based upon their social characteristics means that there will be differing representations and expectations of women within cultural frameworks, which makes it difficult to assess the success of initiatives that promote equality. However, feminism is incredibly relevant to changing cultural norms and values in society, and has brought about changes in how people work, how they dress, the language they use, and their behaviour towards others, and so its impact on culture cannot be denied. That concludes this Tutor to You Sociology topic video on culture and identity, focusing on feminism and culture. Thanks for watching.